It's late, the room is quiet, and nothing is technically wrong. Your phone lights up anyway, and before you even read the message, your body has already moved half a step ahead of you. Your stomach tightens. Your mind starts inventorying outcomes. Not the best one. The worst one. A strange sound in the house. A pause in someone's voice. A child taking too long to answer from the other room. A silence in a group chat that suddenly feels shaped like rejection. You tell yourself to calm down, and maybe you do, eventually. But for a few seconds, your whole nervous system behaves as if hesitation itself could be expensive. And in a very old world, it often was. Not emotionally expensive. Not awkward. Fatal. So why did anxious brains survive better than calm ones? Let's go through it properly. The usual assumption is simple. Calm people think clearly, anxious people overreact, so calm minds should have had the evolutionary advantage. Except that's not actually how it worked. The first thing to understand is that survival systems are not built to make you accurate in every moment. They're built to make you hard to kill. And those are not the same thing. Researchers in evolutionary medicine sometimes use what's called the smoke detector principle, which is exactly what it sounds like. A good alarm system is allowed to be annoying if that makes it reliable. Your smoke alarm can shriek because of burnt toast, steam, or a pan you left on too long, and you'll roll your eyes because the kitchen is not on fire. But the point of the alarm was never to preserve your sense of dignity over breakfast. It was to make sure that once in a while, when there really is smoke, you don't stay seated. That logic scales straight into biology. If the cost of a false alarm is small, but the cost of missing a real threat is enormous, natural selection tends to favor a low threshold. Not no threshold. A low one. There's a classic way of putting this. If running away costs you a little energy, but failing to run away costs you your life, then the better design is often the one that runs too often. In some models, the math gets almost absurd. A system can be well-tuned and still produce a huge number of false alarms because the one true alarm pays for all of them. So imagine an early human hearing movement in dry grass at the edge of camp, or catching a shape in low light, or noticing that the group has gone quiet in the wrong way. Most of the time, nothing happens. A gust of wind, a small animal, a misunderstanding. But the nervous system that waited for courtroom-level proof didn't get to pass itself on very often. That is the first hard truth here. Evolution does not reward inner peace when inner peace comes from being late. And yet even that needs complicating, because the alarm wasn't simply about lions and snakes and obvious movie trailer danger. It was also about attention. About what kind of information gets priority when the world is ambiguous. Human minds, including very young human minds, tend to give more weight to negative information than positive information. Psychologists call this the negativity bias, which just means bad news hits harder, sticks longer, and changes behavior faster than good news. That sounds like a flaw when you say it quickly. It sounds almost petty. But step back and look at the whole inventory. If you miss one ripe berry patch, you are disappointed. If you miss one unstable cliff edge, one contaminated meal, one hostile face, one sign that this water is not safe, you may not get another lesson. You can even see early versions of this in development. Infants are not little philosophers, but they do pay attention to emotional signals from adults around them, especially in uncertain situations. When the cue around a novel object or a risky space is negative, behavior changes fast. Hesitation increases. Approach drops. Contact gets delayed. In plain language, the child learns sooner from the warning than from the reassurance. That's not because the child is broken. It's because negative cues are often more urgent. A hot stove only needs to teach the lesson once. A suspicious dog only needs to lunge once. A rotten smell only needs to be ignored once. And the implication is bigger than childhood. Anxious minds often look irrational if you judge them only by the number of times they react when nothing happens. They look a lot more rational if you judge them by what they are trying not to miss. Now there's another layer, and this one matters because it moves us from moments of fear to stable personality. Not everybody arrives with the same baseline settings. Some children very early on show what researchers call behavioral inhibition, which sounds clinical but means something quite recognizable: strong caution around novelty. New room, new person, new sound, new game, new dog, new classroom, and their whole body seems to slow down and pull back. They watch first, they cling first, they scan first. Their heart rate rises faster, their muscles tense more, their attention narrows harder. Meanwhile, another child is already halfway up the slide with a leaf in their mouth and no plan at all. Both children are real, both are human. And for a long time, people treated the inhibited child as if the story were already written. But that's the complication. Behavioral inhibition raises the risk of later anxiety, yes, but it is not destiny. A substantial share of inhibited children do not go on to develop anxiety disorders. Context matters. Parenting matters, culture matters. The kind of control a child learns matters. In some environments, a cautious temperament becomes social trouble. In others, it becomes sensitivity, foresight, carefulness, restraint. So the trait itself is not neatly good or bad, it is a strategy. A costly one sometimes, a protective one sometimes. And once you see it that way, the old evolutionary picture gets much clearer. A group made entirely of fearless explorers would discover things quickly and die quickly. A group made entirely of vigilant avoiders might survive, but stagnate. Variation itself may be part of the design. Some minds press outward, some minds hold back. Together they widen the species, margin for error. Now let's talk about time, because this is where human anxiety becomes very strange and very powerful. Most animals respond to threats that are present or at least strongly signaled in the immediate environment. Humans can do that too, obviously. But humans also do something else. We generate danger from imagination. We can build a possible future in the mind and then respond to it in the body as if it has already begun. That sounds like a bug of modern overthinking, but there's a real argument that it was one of our superpowers. If you can imagine a drought before the river fully fails, you store food earlier. If you can imagine conflict before the raid, you move camp earlier. If you can imagine winter before the cold arrives, you weave, patch, gather, repair. Anxiety, in that sense, is not only reaction. It is simulation. And simulation changes everything. A person who keeps replaying a route through dangerous terrain may burn mental energy for no obvious reason. Until the day that remembering one bend in the path, one exposed ridge, one backup water source keeps them alive. A parent who sounds overprotective may simply be carrying a nervous system that overestimates low-probability harm, yes. But that same nervous system may also notice the missing child faster, the fever sooner, the shift in behavior earlier. The mechanism is double-edged. That's the point. The capacity to imagine futures lets you prepare for futures. It also lets you suffer futures that never arrive. Anxious brains survive better than calm ones partly because calm brains often wait for evidence, while anxious brains sometimes prepare before evidence is complete. Sometimes too early. Sometimes wastefully. Sometimes just in time. Now, if that were the whole story, the conclusion would be easy. Anxiety is useful, case closed. But easy conclusions in this area usually fall apart on contact. Because anxious systems do not only protect against predators, heights, toxins, or storms. They also monitor social danger, and for humans that is not some soft secondary issue. It never was. For most of our history, social exclusion did not just hurt your feelings. It threatened access to food, protection, childcare, alliances, status, mating opportunities. and plain old practical survival. A human being alone on the landscape was not just lonely. They were exposed. So the brain that notices shifts in tone, shifts in loyalty, shifts in the emotional weather of the group may be doing something ancient, not something frivolous. Think about how fast social threat gets under the skin. A delayed reply. Laughter that stops when you enter. A meeting where no one looks at you after you speak. A teenager who comes home and replays one weird moment at lunch as if it were a courtroom transcript. It seems excessive from the outside. Sometimes it is excessive. But the underlying logic is not random. In a tightly interdependent species, belonging is infrastructure. Reputation is infrastructure. Predicting where you stand is infrastructure. So part of what we casually call anxiety may be the old machinery of social risk management, constantly asking, am I safe with these people? Am I still inside the circle? Should I change my behavior before the consequences become visible? And again, reveal, then complication. That machinery can preserve bonds. It can also torture a person with signals that aren't really there. Now, here's something that almost nobody talks about. The question is not just why anxious individuals sometimes survived. It's why populations may have benefited from keeping anxious individuals around. This matters because evolution does not usually build one perfect personality and stamp it onto everybody. It works more like an uneven portfolio. In many species, including our own, different temperaments trade off different costs. The bolder individual gains first access to food, mates, territory, novelty. The more vigilant individual detects instability sooner, withdraws sooner, sounds the alarm sooner. One takes opportunities. One avoids catastrophe. You can probably hear the tension already. Opportunity and catastrophe are often the same doorway viewed from different distances. So imagine a small human group moving into unfamiliar terrain. One person wants to cross the river now because the weather looks fine. Another keeps pointing at the bank, the cloud line, the cold bite in the wind, the fact that fine can change. One wants to approach the strangers because exchange could be useful. Another notices posture, spacing, weapons, the lack of smiling, and hangs back. One sleeps deeply. Another wakes at every crack of a branch. Is the anxious one annoying? Almost certainly. Does the anxious one sometimes save everyone's life? Also, yes. And the same is true at much smaller scales. The coworker who overprepares. The friend who carries extra batteries and bandages. The parent who packs too much water. The student who triple checks the date. The person who sees the financial problem before the bill is actually due. They are not always right. They do not need to be always right. They need to be right often enough when it counts. Now let's talk about the cost side, because otherwise this becomes a cheap romanticization of suffering, and that would be dishonest. Anxiety is not simply your ancestors' gift. It is not secretly fun. It is not universally adaptive. And once it becomes chronic, generalized, or decoupled from useful action, the story changes sharply. The same system that was meant to fire briefly under uncertainty can stay on for hours, months, years. Researchers use the term allostatic load for this, which basically means the wear and tear that builds up when stress response systems are activated too often or for too long. Elevated vigilance can protect you in bursts. In permanence, it starts to extract rent from the whole body. Sleep degrades. Concentration narrows. Muscles stay braced. Digestion gets weird. Pleasure thins out. Relationships strain. The person becomes excellent at prevention and terrible at rest. And this is essential, so I'm going to slow all the way down here. Saying that anxiety had adaptive value is not the same as saying anxiety disorders are adaptive in the form they often appear today. Those are two different claims. An evolved defense can be useful in principle and still become miscalibrated in practice. A cough protects the lungs until it doesn't. Fever fights infection until it becomes dangerous. Pain protects tissue until it becomes chronic pain. Anxiety works the same way. A system selected for brief, uncertain, high-stakes environments can become a nightmare in a world of abstract, inescapable, low-grade threats. Debt notifications, school ranking, office politics, 24-hour news, algorithmic social comparison, the strange pressure of being visible to people you will never meet. The alarm evolved for intermittent danger. Many modern environments provide continuous cueing without clear resolution. No predator attacks. No all clear arrives. Just background activation. Again and again. There is also a moral hazard in telling this story badly. If you tell an anxious person, your brain is just adapted, you may accidentally make them feel trapped inside a mythologized prison. If you tell them your alarm is false, ignore it, you may shame them for having the alarm at all. Neither response is careful enough. The evidence does not support a smug either-or. We don't know with confidence that every form of anxiety maps neatly onto one ancestral function. We also don't get to declare the whole system meaningless because it can malfunction. Human minds are layered, developmental, social, and messy. Culture changes thresholds. Trauma changes thresholds. Illness changes thresholds. Childhood environment changes thresholds. Genes matter. Learning matters. The story is not one cause. It is a nest of causes. So let's return to the central question. Why did anxious brains survive better than calm ones? The honest answer the evidence allows is something like this. They often survived better when the world was uncertain, when the cost of missing danger far exceeded the cost of overreacting, and when anticipating threats gave people time to prepare. Not always better. Not in every environment. Not in every dose. But often enough that natural selection kept building and preserving low-threshold alarm systems, negative-weighted attention, cautious temperaments, and future-oriented worry. Calm minds had advantages too. They could explore more freely, conserve energy, bond more easily, improvise without freezing, and seize opportunities that anxious minds might avoid. Evolution did not choose anxiety over calm. It preserved a tension between them. And maybe that's the part worth sitting with. You are descended from creatures that had to make decisions before certainty arrived. Before the full evidence. Before the shape in the dark introduced itself. Before the group formally announced who was in and who was out. Before winter. Before infection. Before betrayal. So part of being human is carrying a mind that would rather accuse the wind than miss the wolf. Part of being human is feeling tomorrow in the body today. Part of being human is that your suffering and your protection may use some of the same circuitry. That doesn't mean every anxious thought is wisdom. Far from it. Some alarms are ancient and wrong for the room you're in. Some are echoes. Some are habits. Some are injuries wearing the mask of intuition. But it may mean that the presence of the alarm by itself is not proof of personal weakness or defective character. It may be proof that your nervous system comes from a long line of organisms for whom better safe than sorry was not a cliché. It was statistics written in blood, weather, hunger, contagion, exile, and night. And there's a final twist to all of this that I think is quietly heartbreaking. The very capacity that helped humans survive so brilliantly. The ability to imagine futures, model threats, rehearse pain, predict loss, and prepare before the world makes its move, is also the capacity that can make a person miserable in a safe room. The same gift that lets you build shelter before the storm lets you feel the storm when the sky is still clear. We became a species that could outrun certain dangers by carrying them internally. That bargain bought a lot. It also cost a lot. So if you have an anxious mind, the deepest question may not be how to become perfectly calm, because that standard is probably ahistorical and maybe even impossible. The question may be how to teach an old alarm the difference between a branch snapping in the forest and an email arriving at 11:47 p.m. How to keep the wisdom without worshiping the fear. How to let vigilance inform you without letting it govern you. How to notice that the system is trying, in a clumsy and exhausting way, to protect something you care about. Anxious brains did not survive because they were happier. They survived because false alarms are cheap, missed dangers are not, and evolution has never confused comfort with success. The alarm stayed. The world changed.